and welcome to UX Leadership by Design. I'm Mark Baldino, your host. I'm also the co-founder of Fuzzy Math. Fuzzy Math is the user experience design consultancy that brings consumer-grade UX to business applications for B2B and enterprise tools. And today, really fortunate to talk to Mike LaVista. Mike's the founder and CEO of his digital transformation consultancy, Caxy. I've known and worked with Mike for years, and he's a great person and a really sharp business leader. And Caxy and Fuzzy Math kind of play in a similar space in terms of the clients and projects we work on, which is really heavy focus on the modernization of legacy business software. And this is generally as part of like a larger digital transformation initiative, and kind of discuss how these projects start, how sometimes they fail to start, what are the many sort of perils and risks of these modernization efforts that people face along the way, and really how leaders, teams, and organizations as a whole can mitigate these risks in order to bring and deliver this new tool, this modern experience to their organization and or their customers. And so if you're just starting a digital transformation or a legacy app modernization process, or maybe you're thinking about it, or you're a few months along the way and you're facing some challenges, I really think this episode will give you some tools and tips from a technology and from a design perspective to push forward. So please enjoy the episode, and as always, thanks for listening. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Mark.
I appreciate you taking the time and energy to chat about a topic that I'm really excited about. But before that, as I ask all my guests, can you give folks a little bit of a sense of your background, a bit about your consultancy, Caxy?
Sure. So I'll start backwards, which is kind of where we are now, and we'll talk about how we got there. So right now, Caxy's focused on digital transformation. So a great topic for us to talk about today. And I think we really like to think about starting with looking at an organization and doing a process documentation and analysis and coming up with, here are the places that there are kinks in the hose and we can help you fix it. And then I think on the back end, we do most of our work is probably in the software development space. So once we've figured out what needs to be fixed, we'll help you figure out what to buy and what to build and what to, kind of leave as is. And I got there. So I've been doing this now about 22 years and started off kind of really backwards. I was in a different career. I was playing music in a cover band for a long time, and started this company as sort of like a day job kind of idea. And then .com boom hit and we're off and running. And a lot of self-taught stuff, but really ended up, moving from probably early days in marketing sites and marketing technology support. And then the last 10 years has really been focused on both the custom software side of things, but then the consulting around, what should you do? What's the best way to invest and get something back using a technology investment? And that's kind of where we've spent the last, like I said, about a decade.
Fantastic. Well, I just passed 15 years running Fuzzy Math. I think you have 20 plus at Caxy. So just want to say job well done. And although this is maybe a topic for another episode, it's been a challenging few years for consultancy. So, but glad we're having this conversation. And I was in a class talking to a class of designer, group of students at Northwestern yesterday. And I had the term digital transformation up on the slide. And it was like one of the 3 things we do. And I told them that, I don't always I change that term a lot, depending on who I'm talking to, because the term digital transformation means different things to different people, kind of confuse people. And I tend to sometimes talk about like legacy app modernization as opposed to digital transformation. But from your perspective, those 2 things are related. Like, how do you define digital transformation? What part of that does legacy app modernization play in those spaces?
I feel for your quandary because I also dance around what words and ways to describe the work that we do and what this topic is. I think they overlap a lot, and there are probably some other terms people use. And really the idea is an organization decides to do better, do more with technology. I think digital transformation falls under that, or that's what digital transformation encompasses. And within that is you've got legacy apps littered around your enterprise and across the world. And you need to make hard decisions around, like, is it time to look at dumping this thing and buying something new, or building something, or fixing it? And all those questions drive you down this digital transformation path. And I think as I think about like in organizations right now, like thinking about these journeys, these transformation journeys, um, I think the choice is between do it or be obsolete, because at some point, competitors are going to outdo you in efficiency and what they're able to produce and output, and you'll just slowly, you'll die the slow death riding these old systems into the ground. And so it's a really hot topic, and I feel like at least management now knows this term digital transformation, and whether they know they're doing it or about to do it, this is like, I think it's the term of art that fits. And in a way, like legacy app modernization, probably to a CEO is like a bunch of words that don't make sense, but the transformation piece, that I think that's resonating.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so the telltale signs are like existential crisis facing the business, or competitive. They now have a competitive disadvantage. Like, what are some of those telltale signs that an organization needs to go through a digital transformation?
In my experience, it really is. It's the existential crisis. These conversations don't seem to start until there's so much pain that it's really time to do something about it. But I think when you look at, ultimately there's some business goal that isn't being achieved. Our margins are decreasing. It's taking more and more people and more time to do things. And ultimately all roads probably lead to this one system or lack of a system you have, where people are double entering, or it takes too long, or there's a person involved, something where there's just a problem with your process. And if that's the symptom, the cause might be the technology, it might be your systems and other things. But a lot of times that's how you find the thing to go work on. And I would say I'm sort of surprised at how many companies really do have these legacy systems that they're tied to. I was working on one, or looking at a potential one the other day, that is written in Perl, which I haven't seen in 15 years, 20 years or something. And it looks like there's, updates from 2013 in the code. So like sometimes people sit on these things for over a decade, really not knowing what to do. And it's not till you get to a place where it's like, I don't know if there's any more Perl programmers. It's almost like, when the banking crisis hits, it's like, you've got to get all those COBOL programmers out of cold storage and out of retirement and off the golf course and remember how to do this stuff. I think that's that does happen.
Yeah. Well, these tools run and run and run. We had a client who had a enterprise data management software, and it was run for like 30 years, and it was fine, right? And so there's a sense of, there's a lot of change and there's a lot of risk associated with making these changes, and organizations kind of have to be ready for that change.
Absolutely. And I think, sometimes, the reason they've got these 30-year-old systems is because it's not worth, they want to break it. And then, there might be, millions of customers on this old system, and you want to kick the can down the road, and eventually someone's going to have to figure out how to deal with that.
So Mike, given the folks that you're working with, are they generally aware that they're in the midst of a digital transformation? Are you kind of trying to convince them that they need to go through a digital transformation? Maybe it's a bit of combination of both.
The hypothesis I have is that here we are in April 2024. The two kinds of CEOs kind of have to be ones who realize they need to be more digital, and those who are going to be irrelevant or extinct in the next couple of years. So I find that most of the time we encounter people, they know they need to do it. They probably in some cases have started it or done something with it. And the success rate is really low. I think the number that I've seen in Gartner is 72% of these transformations fail. And I have some opinions about why that happens. But generally speaking, it's because they don't pick really clear goals, and they don't focus on change management enough. I think that's really the big one that gets people.
Okay. Well, let's talk more about that, because I feel like there's a ton of risk in these transformation. I mean, anytime you put transformation or innovation, right, you're introducing a lot of risk, and people don't keep legacy apps around they keep them around for good reason, right? They work. We worked with a enterprise data management company. I think the software had been running in a client's install for like 30 years or something, right? So it's like these things work, and it is expensive to change them, right? Like, so you have to do some convincing, and then you're going to introduce a bunch of risk. And one of the things you mentioned is like change management and what that means and how that maybe can help mitigate risk and support. But so talk about what you're, what's your take on how do you help your clients mitigate risk? How do you get them out of, probably you said they kind of started, maybe they started and stopped, it's not working. How do you get them out of that? How do you get traction? And then how do you help them mitigate risk and kind of introduce maybe more robust change management processes?
So I hate to say it, but I think the biggest motivator I've seen has been that there is either a current or impending pain that is so great that we have to do something starting now. And usually the starting now is like a year too late. But like in recent memory, I can think of a client who was on a platform where the underlying technology had been end of life since 2016. So in other words, like it had been 8 years since anyone had even thought about this underlying technology, let alone the ability to try to find someone who could work in it. So the idea that like if that computer that I think might have literally been under someone's desk, if that computer turned off, there's a chance it wouldn't come back on and the business would literally be dead. And so that's kind of okay, we got to do this. And then there are other clients who look at it like, we have a legacy system that works well enough, and this actually has calls on in the last couple of days here. It works well enough, but we're hearing from customers that they hate using it enough that they're considering moving off it when the contract ends. Or, the UX is so convoluted that, because one of the things I find, frankly, is that these legacy systems often were designed by engineers thinking it was for engineers, and screens with like 100 drop downs and things that make no sense unless you've worked there for 10 years. Like they're just not modern enough to be effective in terms of getting what you need from your investment. And so when I think about like, how to motivate people, it ends up being like you've got this huge pain, right, that needs solving, and that's why they fix it. I found that this sort of more opportunity oriented transformations go slower, have less teeth, and don't really get anywhere fast. So it's like you got to have like this has to happen now kind of mentality, in my experience, that like to really get the organization behind it.
Yeah, it's got to be sort of an existential crisis here.
Yeah.
Either, as you said, competitors are coming to eat our lunch, or this thing is on its last legs and we maybe don't have a replacement in mind. I mean, those are, I think, really, as a little bit of a side sort of tangent, I think really fun problems. I think a lot of people think about new technology, or they're talking about AI, or they're talking about design trends. A lot of people will put it in kind of the consumer facing world. That's the bleeding edge. I feel like transforming or taking a legacy tool that's extremely powerful, that's been around for a while, and moving it and literally modernizing it from a UI, from a UX, from a process, from a back end to front end technology are like really thorny challenges. They live at this like really complex overlap of people, process, and data. And they're just like, I think, really fun design challenges. And I know we both live in this space and we both own consultancies, so we're probably biased in this type of work. But I think some people kind of shy away from it. I just think there's so much actually like good fun to be had by getting into these really complex ecosystems and helping them move forward.
No, it's totally right. And actually being able to play devil's advocate to the thing I just said, there's a lesson for people in our space to think about, which is like a lot of times what we want to do is we want to do it because it sounds like it's definitely a cooler, better idea. But if it doesn't make sense to the business, they're not going to do it. And I'm reminded of something because you said earlier, like these systems that are around for 30 years. A number of years back, we did some work for Motorola that involved like how they roll software out to their phones. And the engine behind it was a mainframe, which at the time I think had been on for 30 years. These giant systems and things that people built in the 70s and 80s, and there just isn't a compelling argument to be made to risk their 200 million global customers on whatever it was to redo it because it was cooler. That's just not going to fly. That's just a really bad, super high risk idea. And so, what we end up doing is something that sort of maybe batched some things up in the format that it wanted in a better way, but we were never going to touch that system. And so maybe that company, maybe Motorola has an existential crisis in 10 more years or something when it's like, we really should start doing something about this because it might die. But you really got to you have to make a great business case in addition to this will be much better for you.
Yeah. So I want to return to, part of this business case is, what are the risks that we as an organization are facing if we don't do this, right? Like what's the cost if we do nothing? And I think when I'm talking to clients, you're talking to clients, we're trying to help them kind of quantify that risk of doing nothing. But there's a risk of of doing something, of modernizing these legacy systems that have been performing well at some level, but need change. And you mentioned change management. So, like, what's your take on how to help your clients mitigate risk? What is change management mean, and how do you help your clients sort of introduce it into their processes, and what does it enable your clients to do?
Yeah. So when I think of change management, what I think about is there are going to be two kinds of things you're going to change. One is going to be the how we do things here change, and then there's going to be the how we think here change. And there's kind of a lesson that I always forget in leadership, which is that the like the main idea that you have that you want to get out to the company, you can't say once, you can't say twice. You got to make it that you're saying it so often that people have this like, oh my God, he's doing the thing about the, you know, quality of delivery talk again. So much so that it's like almost like an inside joke and we're tired of it. And now you hear other people talking about it and it's like it becomes what you talk about. So I feel like unless you do that about digital transformation, what you're going to get 6 months in, and you can almost set your clock by it, is, well, this isn't really going to work. And I'm just going to keep my old spreadsheet and, don't turn the old system off because I'm going to need it for this other thing that I used to do. And you're just never going to get there. And instead, what you need to think about is like, so I think about digital transformation is if you don't do it, the thing you mentioned, like you're going to end up paying like a tax, which is everyone else is going to transform and you're going to have this tax that you're paying people to do inefficient, silly things that either drive your costs up or your margins down to the point where you can't even compete. Like imagine a big enterprise competing, on a really, well-designed system and ERP competing against a system, another company that's got, paper and faxes and other stuff. They're going to crush them in the long run, not even the short run. So if you start with the digital transformation mindset change, what you're telling people is, listen, we need to outcompete and frankly make your lives better and easier, but we need to outcompete our rivals by being efficient and smarter and better. And customers can't be frustrated when they call us up and we have to call them back tomorrow with a piece of data that our competitors have right there on the screen for them. And so once people realize that actually it is an existential crisis for them, for the salespeople, for production people, all that stuff, if we don't do this all together, we are going to fail together. And I think where you get buy-in is the next step, which is on the process part, which is, okay, let's look at what we do. And we're going to go talk to, everyone's going to have a chance for buy-in. We're going to talk to people in the warehouse and sales and, customer service and all these people, distribution and supply chain, all these people, get them together. We're going to map everything out. And you're going to have a chance to tell us, this crazy thing I do every day. I take the stuff from shipping, I copy it out one at a time into this other thing, and I have 200 orders today. It takes me all day. Well, that's really not going to cut it. It costs us somewhere. It costs us margin probably. And so let's give you an opportunity to tell us about all the things you don't like. And we're going to commit to changing it to it being better. But like, you have to start with the mindset of like, guys, we need to all do this together and we can't go backward. It's I can't remember who I'm going to mess up this cliche, but whoever said when we land, we're going to burn the boats. Like, we're here. We're going to make this work. So that's, I think, the mindset you got to take.
Yeah, fantastic. I like the dual component there of, you mentioned earlier, like building a strong business case, changing the mindset. And then that is kind of the first part of getting people on board with the process, and then actually kind of showing them what the process is going to be and how the process is going to be improved. And so how does change management fit into all of that?
So I think you got to start there. And I'll admit, like, we sometimes forget. Sometimes it's so fun to get in the tech, we dive in there. But I think probably you need to evaluate how ready your organization is to do this change management. How excited are people to do something different? Like, are they tired of it? Have they reached that point of, like, that breaking point? And if not, I think like a strategic plan and a communication plan around talking about it, you've got to start there. Or you'll get nothing but slings and arrows the whole time. And so I think it starts at the top. Here's the vision, and you got to say it until you're numb.
Have you ever encountered a situation where the new product that's being rolled out or processes supported by technology falls short of the capabilities of the previous one? And the idea here is like, hey, we're going to get there, but we needed to kind of be smarter about what we decided on. We had to prioritize this first version. This is V1. And that's where I've seen moments of of real resistance and arrows when somebody's looking at this old tool and it's like, well, hey, I could do 100% of the stuff, and you're giving me this tool and it only does 70%. Like, have you run into that we run into it from a design perspective all the time.
Honestly, it almost has to happen. And the reason is that when you've got a legacy product, the legacy product is the end result of, make up a number, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years of ongoing refinement, hardening, fixing, optimizing of this new system. And then I don't know what your MVP schedule is, but like we like to be out in 6 months, 9 months, at the most, right? And there's no way you can bake 30 years of knowledge into that. And so it sort of has to be an incremental improvement. And I think when you strategize about how to roll it out, I think the way to do it is to pick take chunks of features that you can replace one at a time, and then kind of slowly, you change the mixing levels of each. You dial up channel 1 and dial channel 2 down as you go. Because I think the wholesale replacement, is really, really hard to do and would take a long time. And honestly, it's an opportunity to cut, because I think a lot of times these legacy systems, there are probably whole chunks that you don't use anymore. There are systems that we've now optimized from 3 to 1. Like there are opportunities for that, but that's another one of those mindset pieces where people have to be ready for. Part 1 is just going to be, invoicing, and part 2 and that follows on is going to be, but we did invoicing first because, and there has to be because, and it's because, our time to cash is too long. And if we takes us 32 days to create an invoice. Well, if we could make that 2 days, then all of a sudden we can afford, to do these other things. There has to be a reason behind it. I always pick the biggest pain and the biggest money first.
Yeah, I think, it's just a reality, as you said, and I like the way you said it was almost has to happen. But there's this sense of leadership at an organization needs to be really honest, and clear and transparent about it. That we're going to go through this period where we're going to be using, we might be using dual systems, right? You can only use invoicing in the new tool and everything else in the old tool, but we're going to sunset invoicing. Right. Now, we're going to live in this weird bifurcated world for a while, but that is inherent. So you got to be transparent about that. There's going to be some struggles here, and especially when you're talking to customers, right? Like a customer is going to want to use old and new. What's that going to look from a design technology perspective? But you got to kind of get out ahead of it and not catch anybody by surprise, because once you catch somebody by surprise and they're living in this world, they're going to continually try to claw back into the old system and use that old system and want to use it. And I also think another thing that we try, and I really like the prioritization around pain and kind of impact to the users. The other lens that we've helped our kind of clients understand is like, where are there a few accelerators that you can put into this new tool? So as you said, maybe it's an efficiency gain in invoicing just by getting off the old system, or there's something we're going to integrate. And those sort of like shiny objects, they need to be useful. They need to increase efficiency and effectiveness in these sort of business applications. But they're things that can that people see as like, oh, this is actually a capability that we're extending a little bit. It's not replacing 100%, but it's something out there that users or customers can see that's going to actually increase them and kind of help with the overall adoption of the new platform.
I will say one little kind of, just like a clickbait title, but one weird trick you can do to make sure this actually works better is if you also introduce something they couldn't do before. So there's making something better, but there's hey, by the way, in the new system, you can finally, blah, blah, whatever the finally thing is, you can finally get your real-time shipping quotes, or you can finally automate, blah, blah, blah. Now you've got some reason to kind of move in that direction. If it's just like we literally made the mousetrap better, isn't as compelling.
Yeah, not at all. And I think that's where a lot of people start, right? Yeah. Which is, let's just duplicate this 100%. And at some point, at some level, you probably have to do that, or the most meaningful features. But like start with what your limitations are in your current software. Get people into that mindset of, there's a gap here in what we could be doing. And if we invest in this new platform, lots of time and energy from everybody, we can actually have not just parity, right? The term I use with some of my clients is yeah, we can duplicate this in the new tool and we have parity, but what's parity plus or parity plus plus look like? Like what can we do even in the short term that's going to give a real benefit to your users or your customers?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because so we're talking about modernization. I think a lot of what we just described for me and my, at least the model I've been using is what do internal modernizations look like? And I think for external tools, there's that same thing, but now you've got customers and customers behave differently from a change management point of view. So I don't know if you want to go down that rabbit hole. We have a number of situations where, we've got a V1 to a V2 kind of situation happening and thinking about, how that's going to work, how it's going to benefit the customers too, is a lot of the same sort of leading with what's going to be different and better. Because if we redesigned it and it's faster or it's whatever, that's great, but it doesn't really feel like an upgrade. It's really got to be new stuff. And customers can leave if they don't like it, whereas internal people can just not use it or try to use other things. But like I feel like that's just as maybe even more important to think about impact when you think about making sure your customers are served in a 1 to 2 kind of migration.
100%. And I think that like talk about risk, like that's the risk you have to get out ahead of is how are we going to introduce this new platform to our customers?
Yep.
How are we going to transition them? If they have to live in this bifurcated world, how do we do that effectively? I think you're right. There's only a few projects I've worked on where they've like turned the lights off on product A, legacy product, and turn the lights on the new product instantly and transforming and moving everybody over. But that seems like it's kind of dangerous. I mean, one of the ways from a kind of customer perspective that we help our clients think about is pulling them into the process, right? Get your customers into the process, understand them, empathize with them, and take them along for the journey, as opposed to, hey, in 2 months you're going to get this new release, kind of figure it out. No matter how many demo recordings or how much help text you write, they're still going to be really, really confused when they see this new tool. So it's like bring them along for the journey and get them excited about it. Start to explain, not from a sales perspective, which you're going to get of, hey, this is what the platform is going to do, but from like an efficiency and performance perspective, how it's going to make their jobs better. What about from a tech perspective? Like how do you help? What are some strategies for mitigating that risk from a customer for these customer facing products in terms of like rolling out new features or a new platform?
Part of the answer is so boring. It's like kind of watching the paint dry kind of situation. But a lot of it is you need to be really certain about your testing. And, when you roll from something that is almost by definition, existing products are really hardened and work really well because, again, they've undergone, multiple years, maybe decades of picking and poking at the different bugs and stuff. So having like a really solid test plan is really important. I think to your point, involving customers in that. So there's some, I don't know if I would call it buy-in, but just sort of like we're working on this together, sort of empathy about, here's how we're going to make this work. But ultimately, you got to make it. It's products that don't do what they're supposed to do are not successful. So you got to really be sure about that kind of thing. I do think one of the things we've done. That we've called progressive rewrite. I don't know if that's a common term in the world, but we've done in the past from like a 1 to 2 situation where we wrap the whole old app in like the new wrapper, and then just slowly kind of, if you think about like if you look at an app and it's like something.com/feature, slash the dashboard / purchase, whatever, and just start taking off those slashes one at a time, you reduce your risk about the customer losing where they are and what's happening. And from a technology point of view, you're just kind of taking the pieces one at a time and rebuilding in a little bit safer way. That's been really successful when it's been possible. And other times you just had to do the old, you pull the whole sheet off the dining table and all the silverware is still there.
Yeah. No, let's go. No, I think, the introduction of like design overhauls, design systems, has been as you point out, kind of a good first step, which is let's brighten up the look and feel. Maybe we're not changing the usability as much, but we're going to provide kind of a common future-facing UI, just as you said, a wrapper from a navigation perspective, a look and feel, and then start to build out the new features with a new set of usability and workflow, and then slowly migrate over. I think, that sounds simple. It's really, really hard to do, but it does work effectively, and I think it gives a little bit of breathing room to organizations that are going to go through these big shifts and kind of make them seem a little bit less scary.
If I can introduce like a super high level meta idea, I think the other thing to think about is this is going to sound silly. We live in a world where like computers and systems like these are not going away. And I think there's this idea that, forgive me if I'm getting this wrong, but I feel there's a word in Japanese where they think about what a company might do over 100 years as opposed to like our typical 3 or 5 year plan. And when you think about the systems that have been built that we encounter, they really look like they were built like for this one thing, and they never thought about what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years. I don't even know the future me doesn't exist. It's just like this is what we're building. So I almost feel like there's some really intelligent thinking that people and organizations can be doing around like whatever we build now in this V2, we'll call it, as we've been kind of discussing. Think about V2 in a V3 and VX context, and you'll be so much better off. And I think about like in our lifetimes, really dramatic pull the rug out kind of situations. This is maybe a really long time ago, but if anyone remembers the Mac OS 9 to Mac 10 transition, it was like, hey, anyone that had this old system, screw you, you're done. We're starting fresh. That was a really bold move to make. I can't think of how many times people have been successful doing that. And we've talked about these mainframe companies. Like there is a kicking the can down the road scenario where eventually those things stop and someone eventually stops making parts for them. But like really think about how can I design this in a way that is future friendly to things that I don't know about yet. And so that's hard to do, but we think about, we haven't opened the AI can of worms yet, but like these modernization efforts, if they don't include AI, you did it wrong, probably. And so thinking about like, just try to like, think about what that would be like in 10 years as someone inherits a thing that's like, oh my God, why is this so, closed up and this is going to be so hard to deal with. And now I put my company at existential risk again, 10 years later. It's not super easy to do, but I think even the consideration gets you somewhere further and saves your future self.
That's a great call. And I think it pulls your organization and your team out of being really focused and too narrow, and being really, at the micro level and not thinking kind of at the macro level. But you're trying to future proof this so you don't have to do, another legacy app modernization or digital transformation in 10 years. I think that view of where it's hard to predict where the market's going to be your users, but instead say, what's it going to be like to consume this software and use this software a number of years is like a really good, like long-term strategy and kind of, again, a way to break out of like, we have these 50 features, we got to define them and we got to build them one by one based on the priority or something like that. It's like, let's take a broader picture of this. I really like that thinking. Well, awesome, Mike. I think that about wraps up our time, but I just want to say thank you very much for chatting about digital transformation and legacy app modernization. It's a topic I spend a lot of time and energy thinking about and talking about, so it was great to bounce some ideas around. If people want to find you, I know you're pretty active on LinkedIn. Is that the platform of choice?
Let's go LinkedIn. LinkedIn's the place to be.
All right. And then we will look forward to this article on the 7 stages of digital transformation. Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Thank you very much for your time and energy. Appreciate the conversation today, Mike.
Yeah. Hey, and I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't mention I have a new podcast relaunching called The Digital Transformist. And it's going to talk about stuff just like a lot of stuff we just talked about, maybe more in depth. And I'd love to have you on.
Awesome. Well, I would love to be on. We will help cross promote that when it's launched. Luck on the new endeavor and looking forward to listening.
Awesome. Thanks.